समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
History gives every war a name. Officially, in our ongoing situation with Pakistan, there is a pause, but the fighting lasted about 86 hours. Will it suffice for the future generations for it to be listed merely as the 87-hour war? I would, however, suggest a description, if not a sharp hashtag worthy name that I don't have. I don't have a sharp hashtag worthy name, but I will suggest a description. What we've seen just now is the opening move in a two-front war. Two-front war we've always worried about, it's there. This was the opening move in our two-front war. If you so prefer, you can call it a trailer. It is, however, just the early moves in a long drawn-out war of wits, nerve and military muscle. How do I explain this more succinctly? For once, I would avoid the temptation of the usual trope, a cricketing analogy. I would leapfrog to chess instead. Since the Pakistanis started this with Pahalgam and fought with Chinese equipment, technology and guidance, think of them as holding the white pieces, because white pieces, since the side with white pieces makes the opening move, see this as that familiar move called PK4 in the past and E4 now. This means moving the pawn in front of the king, 2 squares in front, inviting the rival to make a counter move. This move can lead to several different strategies, some as exotic sounding as the Italian game, Scotch game, Roy Lopez game. The description I find more suitable is the King's Gambit. Since it's more aggressive, the King's Gambit is more aggressive, it can actually leave multiple tactical options open. The two of them, Pakistan and China, are playing this together and they have moved a pawn forward. Pakistan is in the front, the pawn, powered by the king and the queen and their cavalry and councils in the back, the rook and the bishop and the knight and so on. They wait for India's move now. We might think there is no deadline. Unlike a usual chess game, there is no clock running. We can take our own time. Complacency, however, is no plan. The clock actually is running. The flurry of stories in the newspapers, you'd never catch us citing any TV channels on this. The flurry of stories inform us that now the armed forces have also been following the practice of setting up a red team or red teaming. Red team is a group of sharp officers within who are tasked to think and respond like the enemy. That if you do this, what will the enemy do? Think for a moment like your red team. Think like the adversary. What will it do next? Our basic premise is that while we have fretted over our two-front situation or predicament, we never really thought it would come to pass at the same time. In 1962, the Pakistanis stayed out, although not unconditionally. They demanded negotiations on Kashmir, which duly began under US-British pressure. It's a different story that Sardar Swaran Singh, who was the designated Indian negotiator, he argued and brought Bhutto to a standstill. In fact, Bhutto at one point is recorded as having got really exasperated and saying, listen, why don't you just give Kashmir to us? In fact, the story goes that as Swaran Singh kept on tiring him out, because these negotiations were under Western pressure, because that's the basis on which they had promised to help India against China. His brief, therefore, was to filibuster and delay Bhutto and tie him down in minutiae. And at one point, the story goes, Bhutto got so frustrated and he said, listen, why don't you just give Kashmir to us? It has a vast Muslim majority, and that is the essence of the two-nation theory and partition. And Sardar Swaran Singh, in his very Singh's English, said, we cannot do that, Bhutto Sahab, because India is a secular country. That is how it was recorded to me by somebody who was who was assisting him in those negotiations. Going ahead, in 1965, 1971, the two wars, Kargil and onwards, the Chinese mostly kept away. They made different levels of noises at different decibel levels, but they mostly kept away. This first move of the pawn, 2 squares ahead of the king, shows this has now changed. A two-front war is on, except the Chinese see no need to fight it directly. They have an able and willing proxy in Pakistan. They will keep selling it enough cutting-edge hardware to keep it on par with India, if not ahead in some specific areas, like possibly fifth-generation fighters within a year or a bit longer. Their satellites and other ISR, that is intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, resources will be at their ward's disposal and real-time advice on tap. That's the reason I had said 2 weeks ago that the next provocation from Pakistan may not take the usual 5-6 years. It is likely to come earlier, before the field marshal begins to lose his political capital. That will happen inevitably, and he needs to act before that. Logically, the red team will conclude that China no longer has any need to fight India directly. All it needs to do is to keep equipping Pakistan adequately to do it on its behalf, China's behalf. If you read any coverage of Op Sindoor, an important strategic pointer jumps out at you. In the entire series of exchanges, you never heard of any American equipment being used, not even the F-16s. That is in the battles. They may be flying in the back. I'm quite sure they must be flying in the back. But in the battles, no F-16s were involved. The Swedish Saab REI AEW&C, that is Airborne Early Warning and Control aircraft, are bristling with Chinese electronics, all linked with JF-17s, J-10s and PL-15 missiles. See it as China versus India, but with the Pakistani military in front. For decades, we have known that the Chinese use Pakistan as a cheap instrument to triangulate us between them. This strategy has now moved 2 steps ahead. The first was the Chinese moving up to eastern Ladakh and tying down a significant section of our strike forces, one particular strike corps, usually earmarked for Pakistan. The second is now this direct military challenge from Pakistan. India's aggressive response to this PK4 or E4 move set the two partners back. They might have believed, as CDS General Anil Chauhan said in his Pune lecture, that their rocket/missile assault beginning on the night of May 9-10 will bring India to its knees. Once this gambit failed, with almost all projectiles either intercepted or going astray, and the withering Indian response had the PAF grounded and its bases mauled, ceasefire was the wise option. The red team is now thinking what went wrong and how to prepare for the next round. The 4 things they will worry about. Number 1, India's multi-layer air defense led by S-400 that really more than held out. Number 2, BrahMos missiles, especially when launched from Sukhoi MKIs from a distance way out of reach of any PAF fighters or missiles, even the ground missiles HQ-9s. Number 3, the inadequacy of Pakistan's own air defenses, including the Chinese HQ-9s. And number 4, India's ability to suppress or destroy these air defenses using India's anti-radiation drones. Be sure the Chinese are working with the Pakistanis to address these. They have the S-400 too, and boy, can they reverse engineer? They will try to encash also some of the IOUs with the Russians, of which they have loads now. They will try to encash some of those IOUs to find an answer to the BrahMos. Next generation fighter, the FC-31, not quite the 5th generation, but still a next generation. The FC-31 with a longer range missile will be on its way soon. I am only wargaming the mind of the red team. It's safer to presume at this point that China now sees Pakistan as an extension of their India-focused Western Theatre Command. Chinese PLA, as we know well, has theaterized itself. It has 5 distinct theatre commands. The one facing India is the Western Theatre Command. So the Chinese can now see Pakistan as an extension of that Western Theatre Command. I would go so far as to say that the Chinese PLA would see Pakistan as their newest, the 6th Theatre Command. If it keeps India bogged down, their own Western Theatre Command can chill. There are several books and academic papers written on the Pakistan-China relationship and on how it evolved. For our limited purpose, we only need to run our eye backwards over some important dates. The India-China border situation deteriorated after a Zhou Enlai visit in 1960. In 1959, he had made his offer of a border settlement, which India rejected. 1960, he came again to sell the same formula, but it did not work out and things then started going south and things then began to deteriorate. On 28th of March 1961, see how fast this is moving. On 28th of March 1961, Pakistan sends a note to China seeking a demarcation of their boundary, which they only share by virtue of their illegal occupation over a part of Jammu and Kashmir. In February 1962, as the crisis with India is hotting up and the first incidents in the Galwan area are weeks from taking place, Sir Muhammad Zafarullah Khan, speaking for Pakistan at the UN, admitted or announced that Islamabad was committed to the withdrawal of its forces from its borders with Tibet or China in POK. 2 months later, May 3, the China and Pakistan issue a joint communique to start negotiations on the border. India, meanwhile, keeps protesting. Both sides ignore it. On October 12, Pakistan and China have direct negotiations on border demarcation. 8 days later, Chinese PLA begins its assault on India. If this is not what you call moving at warp speed, I don't know what it will be. Just 4 months after the India-China fighting stops, Pakistan Foreign Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, no less, makes a dramatic visit to Beijing, where a landmark agreement is signed which involves the ceding of 5,180 square kilometers of POK territory, Shaksgam Valley and around, to China while getting some grazing grounds across Hunza in return. India, of course, rejects this summarily and forthrightly. This super short 150-word history explains to us this single pylon China Foundation relationship. The foundation of the China-Pakistan relationship is this single pylon, and this solitary pylon is their shared hostility to India. The Pakistan-China embrace came, although one was a formal US anti-communism ally and the other still a brother of the Soviet Union, which was warming up to India. The deal has strengthened over the intervening 6 decades. The difference now is that China is the world's second superpower and India is much stronger as well. That's why China and Pakistan need each other more than they did in the 1960s. And if the Chinese can enable the Pakistanis to fight India as their proxies, it is value for money. We've seen only the first moves in this game yet.